Tonight on CBC Vancouver News, the Prime Minister touches down in wildfire-hit communities.
This is all about everyone coming together to be there for each other. That's what we're seeing from individuals. That's what we're seeing from orders of government. That's what we're going to continue.
The efforts to build back. Plus, recovering losses.
We are open for business and certainly need people to come back.
After devastating wildfires, the challenges ahead for BC's Okanagan tourism. And generations of an award-winning family craft.
I've always been trying to catch up to where my dad's been, and finally I've been able to get there.
A Vancouver shoe cobbler takes top prize.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Baneet Braich, and thanks for joining us. Anita is away tonight. Well, it's been a wildfire season unlike any other, and now, even though not everyone can return home, the immediate threat in most areas has lessened, bringing some relief. Amid all this, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in BC visiting West Kelowna. Our Brady Strachan was part of that short tour, and there when Trudeau was questioned about his decision to skip over other badly burned areas.
So the airport is just...
The airport is just right over here.
The Prime Minister briefed by local officials on the current state of operations. Accompanied by his daughter, Ella Grace, he met with many of the men and women who have been on the front lines of the firefight.
We are going to be there for each other. That's what Canadians do. All orders of government will be there to work together to make sure the Canadians are getting through this.
And he spoke about how communities and various levels of government can work together during the crisis.
We are facing a changing world right now, changing climate.
The Prime Minister stressed the need for governments to prepare for future extreme weather events.
I've tried to get to as many places as possible, and it's also extremely important that we not interfere with ongoing exercises, ongoing work.
And he was questioned on why he is not visiting the shoe shop, where there are tensions between people defying evacuation orders to fight fires on their own. West Kelowna Fire Chief Jason Brolin says the Prime Minister's visit offered a sense of comfort.
It's fuel for my people and me. We're honored that he would come here and take a few minutes to understand what we experienced.
Pamela Mitchell brought her children to the fire hall to meet Trudeau.
I appreciate you coming to show your support.
Her husband is a West Kelowna firefighter.
Really appreciate the thanks that was given to my husband and his colleagues and all the other people who've worked very hard.
Despite the expressions of gratitude and handshakes from the Prime Minister, fire officials say their work is not yet complete, as dry weather is expected to increase fire activity again in the region. Brady Strachan, CBC News, West Kelowna.
Later in the day, the Prime Minister's visit brought him to Vancouver, where BC's record-setting wildfires served as a notable backdrop to host environmental leaders.
This is real and is being felt by Canadians from coast to coast to coast, and more extreme weather events are being felt by people, particularly the most vulnerable people, everywhere around the world.
The group, known as the Global Environmental Facility, helps developing countries meet their climate goals. It aims to invest $20 billion by 2025, addressing the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And for the first time, members have agreed to direct 20% of that funding to Indigenous-led projects. And we're beginning to get a clearer picture of the damage caused by wildfires in BC's Shuswap region. Preliminary numbers were announced at a briefing this afternoon. Janella Hamilton joins us live with the latest. Janella, what do we know so far?
Baneet, the regional district says about 131 homes and other structures have been destroyed by the Bush Creek East fire in BC's interior, and another 37 were partially damaged. These numbers may change as crews have not been able to complete a full assessment of the damage because of dangerous conditions in some areas.
These are preliminary. There are areas that Canada Task Force 1 wasn't able to get to because of danger trees and dangerous situations and firefighting efforts in the area. So we're not sure what's exactly happening in those areas, but these are the numbers that we have at the moment.
Officials also confirmed today no lives have been lost to the fire, but they're still urging residents to stay out of the evacuation zones because there are unstable trees and downed power lines and dangerous toxins from burned materials. Highway 1 between Chase and Sorrento also reopened today. The highway has been closed since August 18th because the Bush Creek East fire straddled the highway. The Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure says crews will continue to monitor wildfire risk and activity along the corridor and clear sides of the roads that were affected by the fire.
And Janelle, with more hot, dry conditions expected this weekend, are crews expecting the wildfire activity to increase?
That's right. The BC Wildfire Service says over the last 3 days, the fire has not really grown and is still sitting at that 41,000 hectares. But as you mentioned, as temperatures rise in the coming days, the fire behavior is also expected to increase. Hundreds of firefighters are battling this blaze, along with more than 100 pieces of heavy equipment and 17 helicopters.
We have our crews back out on the ground. We have 5 unit crews working on this fire today. Again, 101 ground crew, focusing on some of our priority areas, such as the southeast flank. They continue to work hard to tie in a guard line from the railway up to a cut block. These are priority areas for us close to communities.
The BC Wildfire Service says the Bush Creek East wildfire is considered the province's top priority when it comes to the allocation of resources. More than 11,000 residents are still on evacuation order, with no word yet on when they can return home.
All right, thank you, Janelle. Now, in response to the fast-moving wildfires, BC's limited travel to the Okanagan and Shuswap, those restrictions have all been lifted, including for West Kelowna. But the economic impact of the natural disaster and the emergency response is significant. And Yasmin Ranea reports the tourism industry says the recovery will be challenging.
A smoky round of golf in West Kelowna this morning as tourism and travel officially return to the southern interior.
And now is the time to travel. We are open for business and certainly need people to come back.
The tourism industry is pleading with tourists to visit the region after they were cleared out by the province's travel ban. It was brought in on August 19th to make space for the thousands of people ordered out of their homes due to wildfires.
And it really did empty out our community, all for the reason of having to make sure that our evacuees were safe.
Days later, the ban was lifted for most cities in the Okanagan except West Kelowna, but that changed Thursday at midnight.
I want to express my deepest gratitude to everyone who canceled their plans to travel, as well as to our partners in the tourism industry for their support and for their understanding.
Restrictions lifted more than a week ahead of schedule because of favorable weather conditions, but the tourism industry fears it won't make a difference. Several hotels are way below capacity. People have made other travel plans, and big events like Ironman Canada, a triathlon in Penticton estimated to generate $15 million in business, have been canceled. It was scheduled to take place this Sunday during a month that's supposed to be one of the busiest for Okanagan businesses.
It's a very difficult time because they're just still, coming back from COVID. They're still trying to make sure that they can salvage their winter. And these weeks are important to their economic future.
The province's tourism minister says she's visiting Kelowna on Monday to meet with the tourism sector. The industry says it's still deciding what specific supports it needs from the provincial government as it looks ahead to challenging weeks and months. Yasmin Ranea, CBC News, Vancouver.
And Darius Madavi joins us now for a first look at the weather. Darius, what can we expect for the weekend?
Well, we have this high-pressure system setting up across the province, bringing temperatures up, and we're already seeing those impacts. We've seen places like Kelowna and Kamloops start to climb back to where we'd expect them to be. They're more seasonal temperatures, and tomorrow we see the big jump back into the 30s, which is often a good predictor of extreme fire behavior. Part of that 30-30-30 rule, 30-degree temperatures, 30 kilometer per hour winds, or relative humidity below 30%. all mean some potentially dangerous fire activity. So as temperatures are climbing, we're also seeing relative humidity fall. Tomorrow, we see those relative humidities in the southern interior drop back below that 30% threshold as well. Now, this will only be for a few hours in the afternoon, which is when we could expect fire activity to be at its peak. But it does mean that we're seeing not just the fire danger climb, but also metrics of fire behavior. So when we have already very active fires, we look at something like the head intensity index, and that can give you a good idea of just how much these big fires are going to continue to spread. Now, it's not going to peak anywhere near where we saw it last Friday, but it is going to climb well above where it is right now by Sunday, and then start to come back down on Monday and into next week. Our big concern right now is the smoke. We are seeing very serious air quality concerns across the province, so keep an eye out for that and make sure that you're staying indoors and keeping yourself safe, especially if you're more at risk.
Yeah, you could definitely notice that smoke even in Vancouver today. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Now, while the focus has understandably been on people fleeing wildfires, pets are also in need of special care and attention during a crisis. Veterinarian Dr. Lauren Adelman spoke to CBC Radio's BC Today and explained why cats are especially vulnerable.
Cats are one of the main species that we see affected during wildfire season. It's really, really common to see them presenting with burns, particularly to their paw pads, ears, face, as well as respiratory issues as well, damage to their lungs, often needing oxygen therapy. And so these cats, their instinct is to find safety. And so oftentimes they're not, if they're indoor, outdoor cats, they're going to be fleeing, and then they may end up somewhere very far from home and not be able to get back with severe injuries. And so treating these cats, their burn injuries, particularly to their paws, can be very time consuming. It can take several weeks, if not months, for them to heal, requiring like monthly bandage changes, things like that. So it's really, really important if you do have a cat and you're in an at-risk area, it's a great idea to keep them inside.
Joffrey Lakes Provincial Park is one of the most popular hiking destinations in our province. But if you're planning on squeezing in a trip this summer, consider those plans called off. First Nations are shutting down access to the park until the end of September. As Yasmin Gandon reports, the closure will allow for a harvest celebration without tourist disruptions.
Known for its pristine ice blue glacier lakes, Joffrey Lakes Provincial Park attracts hikers and sightseers all summer long. Visitors have more than tripled over the last decade, and the province's free day pass system only contributed to the site's skyrocketing popularity.
There's, garbage and everything, left, and there's no real respect from a lot of people that visit sites.
Nelson says this infringes on the nation's ability to steward the land, and welcoming tourists at this time would impede on harvest celebrations, which is why the Lil'wat Nation and Naquatwa First Nation, who share the territory, say they will restrict visitor access.
Anybody and everybody that wanted to be there was there, and it was like a social media magnet that you had to be there to, and we endured, the traffic and the safety concerns about.
In 2021, the province promised to recognize First Nation stewardship in the park, a right outlined in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. But by allowing tourist traffic to surge, Nelson says BC parks have failed to fulfill the promise of recognizing their right over the territory.
Need to have time there as well, like it was still in traditional lands, and but it's never been granted. It's never been, talked about. Even with the wildland fires, like we need a voice to be able to close them in, times of and danger and, overpopulation.
In a statement, BC Park says it was recently made aware of unanticipated circumstances at the park. BC Park says those with day passes for Friday and Saturday will not be able to access the park, and bookings for future dates are closed. It also says it will cancel and refund all backcountry camping reservations for the weekend. The two nations say the park will be closed until September 30th on National Truth and Reconciliation Day. Nelson says members of the nation will spend time on the land harvesting and hunting over the next month. Yasmin Gandon, CBC News, Vancouver.
And in Whistler, there's been a frightening encounter between a cyclist and a cougar, and that's forcing some temporary trail closures. Conservation officers say a cyclist was knocked off their bike after a cougar took a swipe at the back tire. The service says the cat initially backed off when it was frightened away, but then it returned and stalked the cyclist from a close distance for 10 to 15 minutes. Now, 9 trails above Whistler's Alpine neighborhood are closed for a week. The Conservation Service says people should carry bear spray in case they come face to face with wildlife on Whistler's trails. Well, a familiar item will soon be wiped off of store shelves in Canada. The company that produces Kleenex facial tissues says the sales are stopping here. Kimberly Clark says the decision comes after what it calls unique complexities in the business. The company says its other products will remain available in Canada. Among those are Cottonelle, Huggies, Poise, and Depend. Kleenex was launched in the early 20th century and has been a popular choice. So how do people feel about news of the brand leaving Canadian shelves? Our Racy Rafiq went out to find.
We just found out that Kleenex is pulling out of Canada. Any thoughts on that?
I guess my first thought is what's the alternative?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, can you think of any other tissue brands?
I cannot.
Could I offer you a Kleenex?
Sure.
Actually, what if I told you that you can't have a Kleenex?
I guess I'll have a tissue.
A tissue! Could you name any other brand of tissue?
Definitely not.
Well, first, can I offer you a Kleenex? You look kind of sad.
Am I sad?
Are you?
No, I'm not. No.
Well, would you be sad if I told you that you actually can't have a Kleenex because they're pulling out of Canada?
Really? I mean, I'll make do with what I have, of course. Yeah, it sucks, but it is what it is.
There's always another product on the market. It's fine.
Right. So no particular affinity.
I'm not married to the Kleenex brand. I think whatever you can find. I mean, yeah, I don't know that I actually notice the brand that I use at home, so I'm not terribly fussed.
I guess it kind of makes sense because Nordstrom just pulled out of Canada, right? And we know that cost of living is going up so high here, so maybe it is more difficult for companies to sustain Canadian business. I don't know.
It breaks my heart that I can't get a Kleenex, quite frankly, and I'm appalled.
And generations of shoe cobbling. A Vancouver cobbler has won North America's top honor for shoe repair, the Grand Silver Cup. And as Rafferty Baker reports, he's just a step behind his father, who won the top prize 4 years ago.
They're, funny enough, vintage Nike baby shoes. And I believe they're about 30 years old or so.
Cobbler Patrick Nydam is working on a bit of a unique job. A customer brought in an old pair of baby shoes that his daughter had worn.
And now his daughter is having a baby. And so now we're going to rebuild them so her baby can use these shoes.
The repair is filled with sentiment and fitting for Nydam, who has been filling his own father's shoes in a way. He's the 4th generation in his family to pick up the trade, and he's taken over the shop from his father, Ronald Nydam.
I could retire if I wanted to, but no, I like to do it still. And as long as I'm useful to Pat and he can use my help, then I'll be around to help him out and do some shoes.
The pair take their job seriously, and the quality of their work has now earned them both North America's top cobbling trophy, the Grand Silver Cup, which is awarded every 2 years. Ronald won in 2019.
I've always been trying to catch up to where my dad's been, and finally I've been able to get there.
His Grand Silver Cup victory is yet another way he's managed to fill his father's shoes.
It was a good win, yes. Tight but good.
So these are the shoes that I won with. You can see right over here. The goal of the competition is to repair one shoe out of a pair that's already heavily worn. And the one shoe you're supposed to make look as close to out-of-the-box factory condition as possible and leave the other one as is. And that's how they judge it.
It's fine shoe repair, the highest possible standards. Craftsmanship that the Nydams bring to all their work, whether it's repairing rock climbing shoes, work boots, or In Vancouver,
I would say 90% of our work are walk-in customers from Vancouver, and that would be definitely Blundstones, Birkenstocks, main category for sure.
even when he's rebuilding vintage Nike baby shoes, Patrick does the best possible job he can do. He has an 8-month-old son who would probably fit these sneakers. Patrick says it's obviously far too early to say whether he'll become the 5th generation to become a cobbler. And Ronald is ambivalent about the prospect, saying he's happy with whatever career his grandson chooses. But it could be good for business.
It would be a good marketing thing to say I'm 5th generation.
In any case, in a few years, there's a part-time job sweeping a shoe repair shop floor, waiting for the next generation of Nidams. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now, after the break, with so much misinformation about health, where can you turn to for expert consensus? We'll hear from a co-founder of the Clarity Foundation about what they're doing, and that's next. And thank you for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. An international triathlon event in Edmonton is dropping the swimming portion. That comes just days before the event. As Travis McEwen reports, it's disappointing news for some triathletes.
This will be the finish line of the America's Triathlon Cup on Saturday. Usually nearby Horlack Park hosts the World Triathlon races. But with renovations there, this is the current site.
It doesn't have the big international broadcast and television. With trying a new site and a new venue and especially a new swim course, we thought it was prudent to sort of take a couple steps back and grow into a larger event with this new venue.
And one thing that was exciting for organizers and triathletes, well, a swim in the North Saskatchewan River as part of the event. However, there's been a lot of tests, but the most recent one wasn't up to standards.
Our understanding is because of the rain and the heavy rain we've been having and the conditions this year for the North Saskatchewan, we just haven't been able to hit those quality standards.
So organizers have switched it to a duathlon, which means competitors run, bike, and run again.
You train a lot, then you prepare your swimming and the running and the biking.
Some participating triathletes are disappointed they won't get to swim in the river as built.
I wish they would have prepared like an alternative. For example, you can swim, and this is something they do in many countries worldwide. They have like this option that you can do it in the swimming pool. So I know it takes more preparation and stuff, but they could have done it. We could have done it. For example, there's like the swimming pool. There's like a couple of swimming pools right there.
Organizers will look at the possibility of giving the river another shot next year, or possibly pausing the event and not taking the risk of the swim portion getting caught in the current. Travis McEwen, CBC News, Edmonton.
It used to end right next to the Trans-Canada Highway on the eastbound bend just after Lac des Arcs. Not safe, says Derek Ryder with Friends of Kananaskis Country.
Ride back along the shoulder, the possibility of dropping rocks down. So it was actually at risk of being decommissioned because there was no safe way that Alberta Transportation was going to allow it.
Online, it's described as scary and hairy, probably why mountain bikers love it. Justin De Oliveira is the president of the Canmore Area Mountain Bike Association.
It's truly a unique trail for this area, and I would say, beyond this area as well. People come to this area just to ride Razor's Edge. The rock slab you get on sort of the final part of the descent is really unique. You don't see that a whole lot of places. And mountain bikers love riding rock slabs, so that's why it's so cherished. It's really a crown jewel of the Bow Valley. So to lose a trail like that really would have been a shame.
Legitimizing unsanctioned trails is tough. Environmental concerns, rules, a host of landowners. And there's getting the plan right with the province, rerouting and building Razor's Edge. It all took a decade.
There were over 40 volunteer days. There was over 200 volunteers involved. There was over 1,500 volunteer hours building the connector trail from here to the original trail.
Signs went up in July. Now the Double Diamond is the toughest sanctioned loop in the Bow Valley. Helen Pike, CBC News, Bow Valley Wildland Provincial Park.
When it comes to sickness, health information can literally be a matter of life and death. A recent poll found most Americans encounter health misinformation, and most aren't sure whether it's true or not. Here in BC, a local organization has been working to rebuild trust in expert opinion through anonymous polling. Joining me now is Thomas Lamb, a co-founder of the Clarity Foundation. Thomas, when it comes to health misinformation, what are you seeing here in BC?
We're a little bit luckier than some other places in North America. We trust our institutions here a little bit more, government and other institutions in society, but it's still a big problem. It's a major problem. Particular groups are especially mistrustful of some things, and they're encountering a lot of misinformation out there on social media, the internet, and causes them to, confusion, and it harms society. So that it's a big problem here.
And again, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the confusion. Why do you think there is so much confusion about what is true and what is not when it comes to health?
Oh, that's a big question. Going back throughout human history, everybody's been trying to stay healthy, and it's a really easy area to mislead people in. So humans are vulnerable to that to begin with, for various reasons. Some people are self-interested, they're bad actors, they're people with economic interests. There are people spreading misinfo and disinfo regarding health issues, science, vaccines, etc. And it pervades social media and the internet. It is everywhere. And one of the problems, it's not just the misinformation, it's contradictory information that's out there, and it can lead to confusion. It leads this sort of middle group of or people in the middle who don't have extreme views, but they're a little bit confused about what to believe because there's contradictory information. They sit in the middle.
And just curious about your foundation, how do you really approach misinformation? How do you choose the experts that you're including in this?
So, people don't necessarily have the highest trust in private companies or things like companies like pharmaceutical companies, governments, but they do trust experts largely, and they trust their doctors. So what Clarity is doing is we are trying to gather expert information. We're polling experts in particular fields, and we are doing that anonymously in a decentralized way. And we're getting expert opinions directly from the experts in ways where they're not afraid to give us, their views, and then we're going to be able to communicate that directly to the people in society. And so this bypasses government, pharmaceutical companies, other groups that may be either are self-interested or may be viewed as self-interested. That's how we're approaching this. So we're polling experts, for example, doctors and specialist doctors, and in the future, scientists and others.
All right. Well, Thomas Lamb is a co-founder of the Clarity Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us, Thomas.
That's a pleasure.
Coming up, the devastating wildfires in Maui comes as a blow to the region's rich biodiversity. The fires come at what environmental cost? We'll tell you that after the break.
It's hard to believe. Just 4 days ago, this was a home and this was a neighborhood. At the southeastern edge of Kelowna, more than 244 houses are totally destroyed. Thursday night, flames crept over the city limits. 24 hours later, entire streets were engulfed. Fire crews were totally overwhelmed, helpless to do much about it until last night.
All things considered, we had a relatively good day yesterday on the fire line across the southern part of the province.
The winds that were pushing the flames toward the city finally died down. Still, the fire covers nearly 200 square kilometers. It's far from under control.
This is far from over. Until we get a significant amount of rain, the potential for extreme fire behavior still exists.
The burnout areas are considered extremely dangerous. It could be days before evacuees go home. The fight is getting personal. 3 Kelowna firefighters have lost their homes. This firefighter almost lost his life when his group got trapped on Friday night.
Even with all the resources, all the efforts being thrown at this fire, one hard fact remains. BC is bone dry. Fire officials say they need at least 5 days of rain to get all the province's forest fires under control. The problem here in Kelowna, there's no rain in the forecast. Diana?
All right, Cameron, thank you. We'll check in with you again later in the program. The Prime Minister saw for himself the devastation in Kelowna. He had a bird's eye view today of the fires, a chance for him to assess the kind of response needed from the federal government.
The Prime Minister arrived in Kelowna after changing his plans this weekend. He was touring the far north. BC's Premier, Gordon Campbell, met him at the airport. Within minutes, Chrétien was airborne again, this time aboard a Canadian Forces helicopter. What he saw from the air was a fire that so far has burned almost 20,000 hectares of land and has destroyed at least $100 million in real estate. After an hour in the air, the Prime Minister visited several ad hoc evacuation centers, thanking volunteers and trying to provide comfort to several of the hundreds who have lost their homes. From there, it was on to the Emergency Operations Center to meet some of those worn-out firefighters.
You go ahead, you take a picture of me.
The real devastation, we flew over, we saw one house standing and a dozen around not standing, and amazingly big space of land that the fire had destroyed completely. But what impressed me is the courage of the people that we've met.
As for who will pay for the cleanup and rebuilding, the Prime Minister says there's a plan.
Money, when we have the disaster, we don't say we don't have the money. We have to face that reality, and what will qualify, and the government will have to find the money.
No one is even trying to assess the cost of damage at this point. Hundreds of homes have been lost. Add to that the $6 million a day to fight the fires, $150 million so far, with no end in sight.
In Maui, county officials are suing the Hawaiian Electric Company, alleging its negligence caused the devastating wildfires in Lahaina. The human impact of those fires was tragic, and as Ithel Musa shows us, the environmental destruction also severe.
Hi, kitty. Lahaina resident Susie Richter's home is gone. The fast-moving wildfires in Maui left nothing but a burnt-out shell, but she comes back every day to look after some friends.
I'm just happy that they survived because they are survivors. And, I think all of Lahaina, we're all survivors of this tragedy, but there's still so many people missing.
Nearly 400 according to a list curated by the FBI, and more than 100 people are believed to be dead. But the aftermath of Hawaii's deadliest natural disaster doesn't end there.
Chemicals that were in garages or the heavy metals from buildings, there are all these toxins in those ashes and in the rubble. And in the next rains that are coming, a lot of this will run off into the coastal waters.
And there are fears that the coral reefs surrounding Maui that depend on clean, clear water to survive could die.
Coral reefs are a vital ecosystem on the planet. It's a source of life. It's a source of recreation, but it's also an engine of the economy here in terms of tourism.
One expert warns Maui's wildfires could have far-reaching environmental effects well beyond the island's shores.
It's an ocean. One should not forget that rather than being a local problem, at some point of time it would become global because all these chemicals or contaminants could be transported to another geographical region in the world.
Some experts worry that Maui's marine ecosystem, which is already threatened by a warming ocean, will become even more vulnerable as a result of wildfire pollution. Ithel Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Officials are also paying visits to evacuees from the Northwest Territory wildfires. The premiers of Alberta and the Northwest Territories headed to a wildfire evacuee reception center in Calgary. Madeline Cummings has more on their remarks.
The premiers of Alberta and the Northwest Territories toured a reception center for wildfire evacuees in Calgary today. That city is one of the temporary homes for people who were forced to flee Yellowknife more than a week ago. Both premiers thanked Albertans for welcoming the more than 20,000 people who have temporarily settled here.
I am eternally grateful. I shall never forget the kindness and the support of Albertans. You've truly shown what it means to care for people, not just your own, but for all people. And that is the Canadian way. So thank you so much.
The premier expressing gratitude, but also frustration with the federal government over the territory's infrastructure needs.
People were driving through our one road out with fire on both sides. The smoke was overcome, our communications went down. We have no redundancy. I couldn't get a hold of people.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau addressed her concerns during a visit to British Columbia this morning. He acknowledged that having only one highway to Alberta was a huge challenge as Yellowknife residents fled south.
That's part of the reflections we have to have going forward on how we can make sure that we have even more resilient communities.
Meanwhile, officials are expecting challenging firefighting conditions in the north, strong winds and hot, dry weather. Similar conditions were seen before the community of Enterprise burned down nearly 2 weeks ago. The town of Hay River warns the next 3 days will have an elevated fire risk. And near Yellowknife, crews are bracing for flare-ups and fire burning through the tops of trees. Madeline Cummings, CBC News, Edmonton.
Meanwhile, over in Greece, police have arrested nearly 80 people for arson as the country's wildfires rage on. At least 20 people have been killed by the flames, and authorities suspect that 18 of them were migrants. Police say people were trying to start new fires on a mountain range north of the Athens and warn they will be caught and held accountable. Spain's women's soccer team refuses to play again until the sports president is removed. This comes after he kissed a Spanish player on the lips after Spain won the Women's World Cup final in Australia. As CBC's Chris Reyes reports, the incident is causing an uproar.
The kiss was not consensual. Spanish soccer champ Jenny Hermoso making that crystal clear in a new statement signed in solidarity by her entire team. In its strong words against Spain's soccer chief Luis Rubiales after he kissed Hermoso during the trophy ceremony. In the statement, they expressed strong and firm condemnation of behaviors that have undermined the dignity of women, adding that they won't play until he's removed. So far, no signs of that happening.
No voy a dimitir. No voy a dimitir.
Rubiales addressed his federation's top brass, repeating over and over again that he won't resign. His defiance was met with applause.
This is a man who is not unlike many men with power in football. They stay, they are not removed, and they report to literally no one. So he's moving with impunity at this point.
In an apology video released earlier this week, Rubiales said he regretted what he did but meant no harm, calling his relationship with Hermoso and the other players magnificent. In her own personal statement, Hermoso said that she felt pressured to justify his actions. During the championship game, Rubiales was also seen grabbing his crotch, adding to the worldwide outrage over his actions.
This is not an acceptable behavior of a president of the Spanish Federation kissing a player without any, condition. So we don't agree this kind of behavior.
Instead of enjoying the moment and savoring this win, this unbelievably attained win, they're having to deal with this utter mess.
As Rubiales' fate hangs in the balance, so does Spain's soccer champs' much-deserved victory lap. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
And after the break, there's been an uptick of mosquitoes in Metro Vancouver recently, while experts say the rain is to blame. More on that next.
These are members of the Cape Churchill caribou herd, which spends its summers in the open tundra of Wapusк National Park. This herd's believed to be stable. For decades, it's numbered around 1,000 to 3,000 animals.
That's pretty unique for most caribou populations, as most caribou populations across Canada are in decline.
Scientists like Russell Turner believe the Cape Churchill herd is doing well because its summer calving grounds are inside the park.
The protection of the core calving ground here in Wapusк National Park could be one of the main reasons for a stable population.
But that's just a hypothesis. Scientists want to know for sure. So Parks Canada, the University of Saskatchewan, and the Manitoba Métis Federation have set up a series of motion-activated wildlife cameras in and around Wapusк.
We have 92 trail cameras deployed on the landscape to try and understand when and where caribou utilize different areas of the park.
Those cameras collected 68,000 images last year, mostly of caribou, but also other species like curious timber wolves. Some of the cameras also get trashed by the apex predators in the park.
A polar bear bit through the motion sensor on our trail camera.
But the main purpose of the cameras is to demonstrate the relationship between habitat protection and population health.
If we're seeing caribou stable with a core calving grounds protected, then maybe that'll be another reason to establish a protected area in a core caribou calving grounds.
This has implications for anywhere in Canada with caribou. Here in Manitoba, the Métis Federation wants to create an Indigenous protected area for caribou southwest of Wapusк.
Right now, their calving areas are protected, so if we're able to protect their core overwintering grounds, that just adds another layer of protection to caribou.
Parks Canada supports this idea. The province would also have to come on board. Bartley Kivas, CBC News in Wapusк National Park.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohith Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
If you've been getting more mosquito bites in Metro Vancouver recently, you're not alone. While the region enjoyed some reprieve from the blood-sucking insects because of dry weather, a UBC professor says rain from about 2 weeks ago has enabled the insects to come out in full force. Take a look.
What are your experiences with mosquitoes in Vancouver?
I've been bitten a few times around my legs over the past few days. Yeah, they're itchy.
Here it's like you just go outside, especially in the evening, and then they are all over you.
Do mosquitoes bother you a lot in general?
Yeah, in general, yeah, they do, and I have a baby, so it's a little bit like want to make sure that she doesn't get any mosquito bites.
They lie in wait as eggs, and the reason that they do that is because they have to complete development for about a week or 10 days in that aquatic form, and so they don't want to hatch in a puddle as it's drying out. They want to wait until the rains come, and then that's going to fill up that body of water to the point that's going to allow them to complete their development.
I don't know. I don't get any bites. For me, that's the best place if you're like, for example, like him allergic to mosquitoes. It's just perfect.
I think I'm allergic to mosquito bites because every time they bite me, it like grows in size like this big.
And I did notice that there were very, very few mosquitoes for the early part of the summer, and then all of a sudden we've had this big wave. And so I would say in a typical summer where the rain is more spread out, you would have seen adult activity be at kind of similar levels over the course of the summer.
So I haven't met some mosquito. Maybe I live in downtown. This is the reason. Maybe I have some special blood. They don't like my blood.
I went hiking to the Girls Mountain, and that was the thing that motivated me to go up, because every time I stopped trying to make a pause, I got a mosquito bite. I'm generally scared of mosquitoes. Not my very best friend.
Do you have a salve? Do you have something to put on there?
Citronella, I guess, for a little bit. For the kids, I use the buzz patch a lot.
A buzz patch? What's that?
It's like a sticker, which is, I think, with citronella for kids, and you just put like a sticker on them. Cute. They like it and keeps them away. At least that's what I believe. If it really works, I don't know.
And Darius Madavi joins us now with more on our weather forecast. Mosquitoes, Darius, I can relate to all of those. I got a massive bite on my shoulder just last night. Have you been chased down by any recently?
I have seen I've seen more of them for sure, but coming from Ontario, I have to say you guys have it pretty good. Like, can't even go outside without being bitten all over. So I'll count my blessings. We are having a bit more rain through much of the south of the province, or sorry, just scattered parts of the province. This was sort of showing up in some models, but not all. We have a low off the coast. It's just sort of sitting there, and it just pushed a bit of moisture up. I wouldn't expect to see this repeat again this weekend. It is a bit of an odd day out in terms of that dry and hot forecast that we have. That still looks like it's going to be in play. But that being said, we do have some more rain on the way. If you're willing to wait a few days, you'll notice this is our little pulse of moisture that was just barely coming up. We're seeing actually more than I would have expected. But as we see this sort of come up through the province, disappear very quickly, bone dry through the weekend until Monday. Monday night, we see this little bit of moisture come up in parts of the south coast. So we get a little bit of rain first. We see our temperature come down at the same time. And then through Tuesday, the rest of the southern interior to follow, getting a good dousing of rain. Temperatures come back down to the low to mid 20s, even for places where we'd usually be seeing 30s this time of year. So very good news in terms of the fire danger. And then just right through all the way to Wednesday. By Thursday, things should dry up again, but this is quite a ways out, so we're not sure yet where we're going to see the most moisture, exactly how much rain we're going to get. Still a ways out, but the idea that we will get rain is definitely some good news, even if we don't know exactly how it'll pan out. In terms of the smoke forecast, tomorrow things will get a bit smokier than today in Vancouver. We've got a good, really not good, but very smoky area right where we see a lot of these fires. If we zoom in on Vancouver, you can see that we're looking quite smoky. If we look to Sunday as well, this is a little bit less reliable, but I do expect that it's going to be our smokiest day. A lot of smoke just being blown our way because of those outflow winds pushing it off the coast. And if we zoom in, you can see very, very smoky. So be careful going outside on Sunday. Our forecast across the province, sunny, some cloud tonight, and then clearing up tomorrow for a pretty sunny day as those temperatures do come up. And here in Vancouver, we see something similar, pretty hot weekend, and then we see that rain start to come in Monday afternoon to Monday evening for a pretty cool week ahead.
Well, I'm looking forward to that rain, that's for sure.
Me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Ottawa is taking aim at what it says is a big source of plastic waste. That's the supermarket. It's asking the country's biggest grocery chains to come up with ways to cut back on plastic packaging. David Thurton with what that could mean for you and your future shopping trip.
So you bring your container from home, you put it on the scale.
This store is attempting what few are doing: achieve zero waste.
If you go to a regular grocery store, you come back home and you realize that you almost have as much single-use packaging than product.
To cut plastics, New Grocery sells milk in returnable bottles, dry goods, and cooking oils are available in bulk.
This kind of shopping experience might not be for everyone, but some of the practices here could become more commonplace in major grocery stores across Canada in the future.
We're asking these large grocery chains like Loblaws, Sobeys, Costco, Walmart to present to the federal government their plan to reduce the use of plastics and especially wrapping plastic.
Not a ban, but a demand for a plan. Cutting the plastics for produce, bagged milk, condiment bottles, and other items as early as 2026. Eliminate the most problematic by 2035.
If we're not satisfied, the next step for us would be to work to develop specific regulations.
Already his proposals are being met with resistance.
The time frames that they're asking us to make these adjustments are unrealistic.
A group representing the big chain says the new rules could increase grocery bills. They argue the proposed measures are impractical since stores don't control the packaging of products, much of which are imported.
They're not going to change the packaging for Canada. We're 40 million people. We're very small in regards to the whole global component of things.
You should be responsible for the waste that you create.
This small grocery store owner says if she can run a no-waste operation, big retailers can too. Canadians can also get on board like we did with reusable grocery bags. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
The number of farmers across Canada has been on the decline, but some young people in Alberta, particularly young women, are bucking that trend and leaving the city behind to make a living off the land. Take a look.
Here we have our straw flowers, all 4 rows here. They're just beautiful and are like jewels when they're dry. My name is Josephine, and this is Busy Bee Florals. We grow dried flowers and herbal teas. We decided to move out to the country because we really just wanted more time in nature and to have more space to grow food for our community and just beautiful things. I have pretty significant climate anxiety, like a lot of people that I know, but I found that working in the garden, growing things, and being outside all the time has helped with that a little bit. It's still all there, but it feels like being closer to the land mitigates that in some way. I got laid off from a materials testing job, and that was like, it paid too well to quit to start farming, but when I didn't have that as an option anymore, it was just pretty easy to make that transition. I apprenticed at the homestead in Grand Prairie, and then just kind of fell in love with it. It just gave me a stepping stone so I didn't have to buy the whole farm in order to learn how to do things and to have mentorship opportunities.
Young Agrarians is a farmer-to-farmer educational network, and we have programming that supports people in becoming a farmer at all stages. We usually work with people in the 20 to 40 age range, but anybody who wants to join, whether you're 18 or 98, is welcome to come up to our programs. And yeah, we're seeing really a lot of people coming from non-farming backgrounds.
According to Statistics Canada, what we've seen is that there has been an increase in the number of young farmers in only 2 provinces, Alberta and Manitoba. And you also see an increase in the number of female farmers of that age category. So that's an interesting development because women farmers haven't generally been on the increase in numbers for some years. You know, one of the things that I think we've learned through COVID is that, you know, the kind of traditional supply chains were very vulnerable. And in fact, many of the people who were farming at a small scale and engaged in direct marketing experienced a real growth in business during COVID. I think young people want a different life. They want to be their own bosses. And out of that comes a real sense of fulfillment, that you're producing food for people, and that you are engaged in fulfilling a real social purpose, in addition to, you know, hopefully making a living from what you're doing. And it's fun.
In some ways, it definitely is a hard job, But it's also like the only job I've ever done that I feel like I could do forever. I think we found our forever home and have no intention of moving back to the city.
When you're learning a new language, it helps to start young, even Indigenous languages like Sinjathan. We flipped through a children's book aiming to do that with orcas. That's next.
A time-honored tradition, donning crisp new white coats. 125 future doctors took the physician's pledge. The Max Rady College of Medicine is welcoming its largest class, up from 110 students in past years.
And I want you to capture this moment, because while being a physician is an incredibly rewarding career, you have also taken a difficult path. And I want you to capture this moment so that whether you remember any of the words any of us said, that you remember how you felt right now.
On top of being the largest, the class of 2027 is also rich with diversity, including 53 students of a visible minority, 2 who identify as non-binary, 59 with rural connections, and 10 who are Indigenous. Celebrating this milestone is 23-year-old Kiana Tate. She's from the Norway House Cree Nation and is eager to make a difference.
My entire education is to give back to my community, whether that's here, but I do plan when I finish medical school, to move home to Norway House. That's always been the goal, and right now they're building a new hospital, which is where I plan to work.
Tate says she hasn't seen enough First Nations people in the medical field and decided at a very young age to pursue medicine.
I just knew that I had a role and a responsibility in my family and my community to do something, and I decided that medicine was my chosen path.
22-year-old Jeanette Comte will earn her medical degree in the college's bilingual stream. She grew up on a farm near the Francophone community of Notre-Dame-de-Lourdes.
We know that there is a physician shortage in the rural areas, so I think it will be a great experience.
She wants to return her services as a physician to her hometown. As these future doctors begin 4 years of medical training, they look forward to be able to help heal their communities. Zabina Ahmed, CBC News, Winnipeg.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Land Back is a CBC original podcast where we uncover land theft in Canada and look at how Indigenous people are taking it all back. Land Back is out now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
Some brand new pictures to share of the moon's surface from India's latest mission to the moon. The spacecraft rolled onto the surface of the moon's unexplored South Pole yesterday after touching down on Wednesday, marking the first time a country has landed on that lunar region. The landing comes days after Russia's similar failed mission. The rover will spend the next couple weeks running tests, including analysis of the mineral composition of the lunar surface. And a new children's book about orcas aims to help readers connect with Indigenous language and culture. It's helping them get acquainted with the Sinchatan language using fun facts about killer whales. We spoke to the authors about what it means to foster connection with traditional languages.
My name is David Dick. I'm the Southern Resident Killer Whale Senior Manager. This is our book, The Kathala Mission, The Introduction. This is a children's storybook, but also for others to read and learn about the different killer whales that transit throughout the Pacific Ocean and throughout the Southern Gulf Islands. It's the first of many short story books being developed by our Quintalian Wasanich Marine Guardians program. Our goal is to share information and stories from our Wasanich knowledge holders about the orcas or killer whales using words in the Sinchatan language. Sinchatan is a Saanich dialect, and inside the book, on every single page, there's only a single word in Sinchatan. And so people get an idea of how to speak Sinchatan, but in a very beginning way. And then simple facts that talk about both the southern resident killer whales, the bigs, also known as the transients, and then a brief information about the offshores. And also kind of like a fun facts that are kind of cartoony. So we use a lot of cartoons, but then we also use our guardians and pictures of us that we transform into cartoon figures. It's just the beginning steps of how we as First Nations people wanting to share who we are by using our traditional languages.
And thanks for being with us tonight on CBC News Vancouver. We will continue to bring you the latest updates on that wildfire coverage. We just want to remind you, if you're not already watching us on CBC Gem, that is our free app. And we will be back with your late news tomorrow. But for now, we leave you with some splashing orcas. Good night.